What's up, Trekkies? Welcome back to the channel. This is my review of Deep Space Nine's second season episode, Paradise. In this episode, Sisko and O'Brien discover a colony of humans who crashed on a remote planet a decade before. Unable to beam back to their runabout or use any technology due to some sort of energy field, the pair's situation turns dangerous when Sisko clashes with the colony's anti-technology leader, who appears determined to maintain her community's primitive status quo. I think this is an underrated episode. It's not an all-time Deep Space Nine classic by any measure, but it's a strong early episode that gives us a good showcase for Sisko and is a good example of the show's willingness to tackle complex ideas. I think it's well known at this point that in the 90s, the various Star Trek shows would usually pass scripts from show to show. Shows like Voyager and Enterprise definitely benefited from an abundance of scripts, and I'm sure there are more than a few episodes of Deep Space Nine that began life as ideas for TNG. Watching this episode back, the first feeling that I get is, well, this is probably an episode that is a reject from TNG. It's not in Deep Space Nine, they're in a runabout. That immediately screams to me, this is probably going to be some sort of TNG light episode. But that all goes away as the episode progresses and the story becomes more apparent as something that's far more complicated. It's definitely not an episode that would have been comfortable fitting into the TNG mold. But what do I know? It's entirely possible that this episode was conceived purely as a vehicle for Deep Space Nine. A quick check on Memory Alpha would tell me, but I'm just far too lazy to do that these days. And the more I think about this episode, the more it feels like a Borg episode. That might sound a bit strange, and Deep Space Nine never had a Borg episode. I mean, not if you don't count Emissary, which I'm definitely not doing here. But think about it. Alexis wanted to take Sisko and O'Brien and essentially integrate them into her society, into the colony. A large part of the episode is all about getting Sisko to take off the Starfleet uniform and discard their identity and assimilate into the collective. A Luddite Borg collective. That's an interesting idea. Let's talk about the good aspects of this episode. And the first thing I've got, obviously, is that central conflict between Sisko and Alexis. It's a big, meaty, ideological battle. The immovable object versus the irresistible force. I'm sounding like a WWE promo here, aren't I? Sisko is the Starfleet man. He is very much the future, moving forward. Alexis is a Luddite who doesn't like technology. Both of them are completely stubborn and steadfast in their beliefs. Neither of them are going to give an inch to the other. And I love the escalation of their conflict, starting as Alexis welcoming O'Brien and Sisko into the community, but just dropping these subtle hints, these little seeds that, hey, you better not fuck with this community that I've built here. Obviously, it's not long before things get a bit heated. What I love about the episode is its slow, deliberate pacing and this slow, inevitable escalation of the conflict. Grace Strickland is great as Alexis, and I don't know about you, but I get a very Kate Mulgrew vibe from her, and it's not just because of the red hair. There's clearly some Irish there. The two have what I like to call that quintessential Star Trek delivery. You know what I mean? That kind of theatrical talking to the audience, talking to the back of the audience. Both of them do that very well. But of all the performances in this episode, and there are many, it's Avery Brooks who just is on another level entirely. I love Avery Brooks. I will sing his praises all the time. I know there are some members of the fandom who don't like him, and it's not because of his skin color, although I'm sure those people probably exist, unfortunately. There are people out there that feel like Brooks's acting is a bit weird and non-traditional, and that's fine. I do kind of get that to a degree. I've always really connected with the character as a father, as a strong leader. He's one of my favorites, and this is such a good example of all of those attributes. What makes Avery Brooks's Sisko so unique, and it's here. It's right here. I feel like every captain has probably 5 episodes that you would recommend on a playlist of these episodes make this captain the character they are. Paradise would be on that list for Sisko, and that's crazy because there are so many episodes that typify Sisko as this badass, as this diplomat, as this emissary. It defines Sisko as this strong leader, a man of principle, a man of belief, a man who believes in the Federation, he believes in his lifestyle, but beyond any of that, he believes in doing what he can with the tools he has to protect people. And obviously when that comes into conflict with Alexis's beliefs and her way of life, drama! What I love about this episode as Deep Space Nine playing in the sandbox of grey is Alexis's character. By all definitions, she is a villain. What she does is morally reprehensible. If you take a list of all of the great Star Trek villains, whether they're major antagonists or just minor ones like Alexis in this episode, the all-time best ones, the ones that stand out, are usually the villains who truly, genuinely believe what they're doing is good. And that is Alexis personified. She truly believes she is doing the right thing, and that makes her incredibly dangerous, but it also makes her incredibly relatable. And that brings us to the core central themes that these two are in conflict about. There are people out there that yearn for a simpler time, times when TikTok wasn't a thing and people weren't glued onto their phones and going to concerts and filming the whole fucking thing. And why do people do that? It's so fucking weird. I mean, if we're having conversations now about if we've become too dependent on technology for our own good, you can best believe that in the future that is Deep Space Nine, they're probably having those conversations then as well, just more intensified, like this in this episode. The best kind of Star Trek is the Trek that makes you think and makes you feel, and Paradise ticks both of those boxes perfectly. It's an irresistible clash of ideology with that inescapable tension. You know where it's going. You can't take your eyes off of it. And it culminates in this horrible scene where Sisko is forced into this hot box. And when you watch the episode back and you see the introduction of the colony, you can see this hot box front and center. And you know someone's in it. That's grim! Another strong aspect of this episode, and if I'm talking about Sisko, I have to talk about O'Brien. We get small but very crucial callbacks at the start of the episode as O'Brien's recounting his days on Setlik 3, a place and time in his life that he would talk about in more detail in TNG's 4th season episode, The Wounded. Not only does this serve as a way of reinforcing stuff that we know about the character, continuing to add that depth to him, it also reminds us that he is an action hero and he was a man of war. And that comes in really handy at the end when he goes all Rambo in the forest and is responsible for the resolution of this episode. Now onto the stuff that I'm less enthusiastic about, and the main thing here really is just the way the episode takes a turn for the more basic with the revelation that Alexis was responsible for the dampening field that has trapped the colonists on this planet. Now, by this point, the episode had already taken steps to clearly define Alexis as an out-and-out antagonist with her treatment of Sisko, forcing him into this hotbox, that bloody hotbox. And while I find those actions personally reprehensible, I can at least understand and accept why she was doing what she was doing. But this revelation that she intentionally trapped her fellow colonists with this technology, it feels like a bit of a cop-out. The episode goes from this grey area and jumps straight into the black of she's bad, she's done wrong, she's a hypocrite. If I was writing this, I wouldn't have had the geonetic field dampener because I think that that is too hypocritical for the character. Alexis could have maintained that antagonistic front by purely being motivated to just keep her community together, keep her family together. Now onto the bad stuff. The only thing I really have here, and I don't even think it's a bad thing, is just Kira and Dax being pretty redundant in the episode. No one else from the main cast is in this episode, and Kira and Dax really are only in it for a couple of minutes, and they only turn up at the end to just make sure that there's someone there to beam up Sisko and O'Brien. I would have just had the entire episode set on the planet. Doing so, I think, would have enhanced the isolationist vibe, making Sisko and O'Brien truly feel like they're on their own and help isn't coming, and that they truly are trapped on this planet with this colony and this bitch that's going to put them all in a box. If you take Kira and Dax out completely, do you lose anything? I don't think you do. But like I said, I think Paradise is a solid early episode of Deep Space Nine. It's a thought-provoking episode that challenges the viewer, even though I do think that it does get a little bit simplistic towards the end. It still raises questions, it still gets us thinking, and that in my book is a good thing. Great performances across the board, but particularly from Avery Brooks, who just continues to be the best thing about Deep Space Nine. And just how shit is it that they just didn't make him a captain from the get-go. I think there's a lot of value in the early episodes of Deep Space Nine. We always talk about DeWitt as a fine example of what Deep Space Nine could do in its early run, but there are more episodes than that, and I think Paradise definitely deserves to be in that conversation for some of the show's best early episodes. But what did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Next to my head is another video that I think that you might like, so go check that out. Till next time, I'm the TrekLad. Live long and prosper.